The man who walked through the door of Vanguard Martial Arts in Carson, California on a Tuesday evening in November did not look like someone who belonged there. Not to the people already in the room. Not at first glance. He was wearing dark jeans, an old gray long-sleeve shirt, the kind that has been through enough wash cycles that the fabric goes thin at the elbows, a pair of well-used training shoes that had seen better days and probably better floors. He had a duffel bag on one shoulder and nothing in his hands. No coach walking with him. No assistant holding his gear. No one to introduce him. He stopped at the edge of the main mat, looked around the room once, and found the corner where a man named Danny Ortega was wrapping his hands and watching. The laughter started before he reached Danny. Not loud, not cruel in the obvious way, the quiet kind. The laugh that passes between people who share a wall and a practice space and an unspoken agreement about who belongs in those rooms and who is going to be asked, politely, to find somewhere else. One man nudged another. Someone made a remark that didn't carry across the gym but landed clearly enough in the faces of the people who heard it. The woman near the heavy bags, 34 years old, state champion in 2019, the kind of fighter who had earned the right to have opinions about who walked onto her floor, looked once and looked away. The man in the gray shirt kept walking. He set his bag down beside Danny Ortega. He introduced himself with a first name. Danny shook his hand without standing up, the minimal courtesy extended to someone the room had already decided was in the wrong place. Then, the man asked if there was time for him to work with someone. Danny looked at him. He looked at the ring at the center of the room. He looked back. "We have an open session in about 20 minutes. Danny said, "You're welcome to stay." 4 seconds. That was all it took, 20 minutes later, to change every assumption in that room. 4 seconds at the start of 3 minutes that nobody who was there that evening has entirely gotten over since. There is a gym on Avalon Boulevard in Carson, California called Vanguard Martial Arts. It has been on that street for 19 years, in the same building that started as a warehouse and was converted by a man named Art Delgado using his own hands, and $11,000 he had saved over 6 years driving a delivery truck. The sign above the door is hand-painted, black letters on white, plain and exact, the way Art had wanted it. Not a logo, not a brand, just the name, and beneath it, in smaller letters, technique. Discipline, respect. The floor inside is padded mat from wall to wall, the gray foam kind that absorbs impact without forgiving it entirely. There are heavy bags along the east wall, 6 of them, and a speed bag setup in the far corner that has needed a new swivel for 18 months and keeps getting used anyway. 2 regulation-size rings, side by side, at the center of the room. Mirrors along the north wall, the kind that have a slight ripple from age. A whiteboard near the entrance where Art posts the weekly schedule in red marker, the same handwriting he has used for 19 years. The gym runs youth classes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons. Adult classes Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 7 to 9. Saturday mornings are open sessions. Anyone with membership, any level, any discipline. Tuesday evenings were the serious sessions. The people who trained Tuesday evenings had been training for years. Some of them had competed. Several of them had won things in places where winning things was difficult. The entry fee was $80 a month for adult membership. There was no discounted trial period. Art did not believe in trial periods. He believed that the way a person walked through the door on the first day told you something important about why they had come, and that if the $80 was a problem, he had a scholarship fund that he did not advertise but also did not hide. It was not a glamorous gym. It was not trying to be. The water fountain near the entrance made a sound like a small engine failing. The changing room had one working overhead bulb and two bare sockets. But the training on those mats, in those rings, under the instruction of coaches who had given pieces of their lives to understanding the disciplines they taught, that was real. That was as serious as it got in Southern California, at that level, in that price range. The people who trained there knew that. It was part of why they were there. And it was part of why the laughter started when the man in the gray shirt walked in. Danny Ortega was 41 years old. He had been training at Vanguard for 11 years and coaching there for the last 4. He held a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and had spent 2 years in his early 30s competing in mixed martial arts at a regional level. Not the championship level, but the serious level. The level where you find out what you are actually made of and have to do something with the answer. He had a scar along his left eyebrow from a fight in Anaheim in 2015 that he had lost badly and learned more from than any fight he had won. He was the kind of coach who remembered what it felt like to be the least skilled person in the room. He remembered it with a specificity that most people lose over time. He used it the way a craftsman uses a good tool, carefully, and only when it was the right one for the job. He was also, on that Tuesday evening in November, moving through the particular fatigue of a man who had been carrying something for 3 weeks and had not yet decided what to do with it. His daughter, Sophia, was 15 years old. She had been training at Vanguard since she was 10, first in the youth classes, then with Danny directly on Tuesday evenings when he could manage both roles at once, father and coach, without the two getting in the way of each other. She was good, not just good for her age, genuinely good in the way that is recognizable to anyone who understands what they are looking at. Quick, technically precise, with an instinct for reading an opponent's weight and intention that most adults spend years trying to develop. 3 weeks earlier, a scout from a national youth development program had come to watch a Saturday open session. He had watched 6 fighters. He had offered invitations to 4 of them. Sophia was not one of the 4. Danny had not disagreed with the decision in his mind. He understood what the scout had seen and what he had decided and why. But he had sat with Sophia in his car in the parking lot on Avalon Boulevard for 22 minutes after the scout left, and he had watched his daughter be 15 years old and absorb a disappointment with a composure that made his chest ache, and he had not known what to say to her that was both honest and useful. And he had said something that was honest but not entirely useful, and he had driven her home in the particular silence of a parent who has run out of adequate words. For 3 weeks he had been carrying that silence into the gym with him. It showed up in the sharpness of his corrections, in the extra 10 minutes he spent on the mat after everyone had gone home, in the way he watched Sophia train on Friday afternoons with an attention that was more analytical than it needed to be. He was looking for the thing she needed. He had not yet found it. He had a specific idea about what that thing was. He had been coaching long enough to know the difference between a fighter who needed to improve their technique and a fighter who needed to see something true about what they were capable of. Sophia's technique was not the problem. What she needed was evidence, not instruction. Evidence. He did not yet know where it was going to come from. The man with the duffel bag arrived at 7:22 p.m., during the stretch between the end of the structured class and the beginning of the open sparring session. It was the 20-minute window when the room belonged to itself, people working the bags, reviewing footage on their phones, having the kind of side conversations that don't happen when the coach is calling instructions. The room noticed him when he came in. Not all at once, but in the way a room notices something that doesn't fit the pattern it has established. He was not young enough to be a beginner arriving nervous. He was not old enough to be a former fighter returning for fitness. He was in his late 40s, dark-haired, moving with the loose ease of someone comfortable in his body, but not advertising it. The dark jeans were the thing the room clocked first. Nobody trained in dark jeans. Dark jeans meant you had wandered in by mistake, or you were there to watch, or you had looked up martial arts gym near me without entirely thinking through what you were walking into. The woman by the heavy bags, her name was Veronica Salinas, state champion. 3 years running a personal training business while she competed, watched him cross the floor and made a sound that wasn't a word, but was clearly an opinion. The man beside her, a 28-year-old named Marcus, who had been training for 6 years and thought of himself as the standard against which new arrivals were measured, laughed once, short and definite. It was not a vicious laugh. That is worth saying. It was the laugh of people who have worked very hard to be good at something and have developed, as a side effect of that work, a low tolerance for people who do not understand what the work costs. It was the laugh of a closed room. Danny heard it. He was across the gym, wrapping his hands, and he heard it the way you hear something when you are tired and carrying something, and the sound lands on the exact nerve it would have been better to avoid. He looked at the man walking toward him. He looked at the room. He extended the minimum courtesy. He gestured at the ring. He told the man about the open session. Then he went back to wrapping his hands and waited to see what would happen. What happened began at 7:44 p.m. The open sparring session ran in 5-minute rounds with 2-minute rests. The convention was that you signaled interest in a round by moving to the edge of the nearest ring. Danny matched partners based on size, skill level, and what he thought would be useful for both people. He did not always explain his reasoning. He matched the man in the gray shirt with Marcus. Marcus was the kind of fighter who fought the way he thought about fighting, directly, with confidence in his own ability and a habit of underestimating whatever had not yet proven itself. He stood 5'11" and weighed 187 pounds, and had sparred hundreds of rounds in this ring against opponents who had learned, over time, to give him genuine competition. The man in the gray shirt was slightly shorter, slightly lighter. He had put on sparring gloves that Danny had loaned him from the shelf, the 16-ounce loaner gloves, worn from use, not the gleaming 16-ounce gloves that serious practitioners bring to the gym in a dedicated bag. Marcus looked at him across the ring with the expression of someone about to demonstrate something. Danny called the round. 4 seconds. That was how long it took. Not for Marcus to lose the round. The round lasted its full 3 minutes, because this was a gym and not a competition, and no one was keeping score in any official sense. But 4 seconds was how long it took for the room to understand that something was different about what they were watching. 4 seconds from the opening movement, a single, economical lateral shift that placed the man in the gray shirt at a precise angle Marcus had not offered him, and had not intended to the moment when Veronica Salinas, by the heavy bags, stopped hitting and watched. She was not the kind of person who stopped hitting to watch someone spar. She had seen thousands of rounds in this room. She had her own training to do and her own time to account for. She stopped anyway. Marcus was good. That is the part of this that matters. Marcus had 6 years and real skill and the particular sharp competence of someone who has put in genuine hours. He was not a pushover, and he was not performing. He was trying. The man in the gray shirt moved as if the round were happening in a slightly different time signature than the one Marcus was working in, slightly slower in the setup, slightly faster in the transition, with a precision in his angles that was not aggressive so much as geometrically exact. He did not land hard shots. He did not need to. He landed correct ones, in the specific places that the geometry of each exchange made available, and he did it with the unhurried authority of someone who had been doing this for a very long time and no longer needed to think about the vocabulary to think in the language. At 2 minutes and 8 seconds, Marcus threw a combination he had thrown 100 times in this ring. It had worked most of those 100 times. It did not work now. It did not fail dramatically. It was not countered with anything showy, nothing that would make a training video or a highlight reel. The man in the gray shirt simply wasn't there when the combination arrived, and then he was somewhere else, briefly, and then he was back. Marcus reset. He was breathing harder than he should have been 2 minutes in. The room had gone quiet. Not the quiet of disinterest. The quiet of attention, the specific contained stillness of a group of people who have trained long enough to understand what they are watching and have revised, in real time, what they thought they were watching. The round ended. Danny called it. He was standing at the edge of the ring and his hands were still, which was unusual for Danny during a sparring round. The man in the gray shirt turned to Marcus, bumped gloves, said something quiet. Marcus nodded, slowly, with the specific, reluctant openness of someone encountering new information about the dimensions of a room they thought they already knew the size of. Danny did not ask the question immediately. He let the next 2 rounds happen. He matched other partners. The room had resumed its normal noise, but it was different noise, the kind that happens when people are processing something and the processing requires activity. Veronica went back to the heavy bag and hit it with a concentration she hadn't brought to the first part of the session. Marcus sat on the bench near the east wall and watched the rest of the sparring with a stillness that was the opposite of how he usually watched. At 8:31, Danny walked to where the man in the gray shirt was unwrapping the loaner gloves and sat down on the bench beside him. "Where did you train?" he said. It was not a small question in this context. In this room, on this floor, it was the question that placed a person on a map. The man named several places. A gym in Los Angeles he had worked with years ago. A coach in the Valley who had since retired. Sometime overseas, with people he named carefully and without ostentation. Danny listened without interrupting. "You've been doing this a long time," he said. "A long time," the man agreed. Danny was quiet for a moment. "Then, my daughter trains here." The man waited. "She's 15. She's good, genuinely good. Not good for her age good. But she had something happen 3 weeks ago that I don't entirely know how to help her past." He looked at the ring. "She needed to see something tonight. She's been watching since you came in." The man looked toward the far corner of the room. There was a girl sitting on the bench beside the mirrored wall, 15, with Danny's eyes and a notebook in her lap she had stopped writing in 4 minutes ago. She had been watching. She had not looked away once during the sparring round. "What does she need to see?" the man said. Danny thought about it. He had been thinking about it for 3 weeks and had not yet put it into words that felt right. He tried now. "That the room being wrong about you doesn't make you wrong," he said, "and that the only thing the room's opinion is worth is about 1 minute and 30 seconds. After that, you're on your own anyway." The man was quiet. He looked at Sophia on the bench with her notebook. He looked back at the ring. "Is she training Friday?" he said. "Every Friday," Danny said. "I'll come back Friday," he said, "if that's all right with Art." He had not met Art Delgado. He had not been introduced to him. He knew his name because he had done the small, specific research of someone who does not walk into rooms unprepared. Danny looked at him. "Yeah," he said. "That'll be all right with Art." The man stood up. He shouldered his duffel bag. He said goodnight to Danny and to Marcus, who was still on the bench, and who said goodnight with a straightforwardness that cost him something and was better for the costing. He paused briefly beside Veronica Salinas, who was cooling down by the water fountain, and said, "Good power on that left cross. You're loading a fraction early. Give yourself another 2 inches before you commit." Veronica stared at him. She thought about it later. She adjusted her timing on the following Thursday. It was exactly 2 inches. He walked out the door and into the Avalon Boulevard evening, and the door swung shut behind him. He came back on Friday. He sat down with Sophia on the mat beside the mirrored wall for 40 minutes, and what happened in those 40 minutes was not a training session in the conventional sense, not correction, not instruction, not the structured building of a skill. It was a conversation conducted in the specific language of a mat and a shared practice. One person moving, the other watching. Then the other moving and the first one watching. And between the movements, words, he told her about the first time someone who knew what they were talking about had told him he was not good enough at something he had given real time to. He told her the year. He told her what was said, with the specificity of someone who has carried an exact memory for a long time. He told her what he had done with it. "I went home," he said, "and I was in a bad mood for 3 days, which was the right amount of time to be in a bad mood about it. And then on the 4th day, I went back into the room. And the thing is, I was different on the 4th day. Not because I had gotten better, because I had decided something. And the decision showed." Sophia looked at him. "What did you decide?" she said. "That the opinion and the evidence are 2 different things," he said. "The opinion belongs to whoever is giving it. The evidence belongs to whoever is willing to build it." He paused. "The scouts saw 1 day. You have every other day." They worked for another 20 minutes. He watched her move. He said very little. When he spoke, it was specific, not general encouragement. Not the kind of motivated language that sounds right and means nothing, but observations so precise they landed like measurements. The angle of her guard, the particular tell in her footwork before a level change, the moment in her right combination where she had a half-second more than she was using. He left at 6:45, before the adult class began. He thanked Art Delgado at the door, shook his hand with both of his, the way you thank someone for something real. Art, who had built this gym with his own hands in 19 years and $11,000 and a hand-painted sign, looked at his guest for a moment and said, "You come back whenever you want." He said he would try. Sophia stood in the middle of the mat after he left and looked at the ring for a long moment. Then she opened her notebook, the same one she had not written in during the sparring round on Tuesday, and she wrote for 11 minutes without stopping. Danny watched her from across the room and felt the specific, quiet relief of a parent who has found the thing they were looking for without being entirely sure what it was until it arrived. The National Youth Development Program held its next open selection event 4 months later, in February, at a facility in San Diego. Scouts from 3 regional programs attended. Danny drove Sophia down on a Saturday morning and sat in the bleachers with the particular calibrated stillness of a coach who knows that the work is done and the watching is all that is left. Sophia competed in 4 evaluation rounds. She won 3 of them. The 4th went to a girl from Phoenix who was, as Danny would tell you without hesitation, genuinely better on that day in that round. And that was the right result, and Sophia knew it and handled it correctly. The scout from the original selection session, the one from November, the one from the parking lot on Avalon Boulevard, came to speak to Danny at the end of the day. He said, "She's different." Danny said, "She made a decision." The scout waited to see if there was more. Danny did not offer more. Some things were not his to explain. Sophia received an invitation to the development program's spring cohort. She accepted it on a Tuesday evening in the gym on Avalon Boulevard, standing in the middle of the mat. She told Danny before she told anyone else, because that was how the two of them had always done things, and some habits are correct. Marcus spent 3 weeks thinking about the 4-second shift in the opening of that round. He rewatched a video of his own sparring that he had recorded 2 months earlier and found, with the uncomfortable clarity of someone whose eyes have been adjusted, 11 moments in 6 minutes where he had done what he had always done when he could have done what would have been better. He did not say this to anyone. He worked on it quietly, and the Tuesday evening sessions and the Saturday open sessions, the way you work on something you have decided, is worth the cost of fixing. By March, Danny noticed. He said nothing about it directly. He matched Marcus with harder partners. Marcus won some of those rounds and lost some of them, which was the correct outcome and had not always been the case. Veronica Salinas adjusted her timing on the left cross 2 inches. She competed in April at a regional tournament in Riverside. She won her division by technical decision in the second round. Afterward, in the changing room, she thought about the man who had paused at the water fountain and offered her 2 inches worth of information on his way out the door. She thought, I didn't thank him. She thought, I should have thanked him. She has thought about this periodically since. It has made her more willing to speak, on her way out the door, when she has something useful to offer. Art Delgado repainted the sign above the door in the spring. Same black letters on white. Same name. He added 1 line beneath the original, 4 words in the same plain lettering as everything else Art Delgado had ever put his name to. Every day is evidence. He did not explain the addition to anyone who asked. He pointed at it and said, It's just true. Which, in Art's view, was explanation enough. The sign has been there since March. People walk past it every day. The kids on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons. The serious adults on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. The open session on Saturdays. Some of them notice it. Some of them don't. But the ones who have been in the gym long enough to know where it came from, they notice it every time. I have told stories about this room for longer than I expected to. About what happens in the specific geography of a place where people go to find out what they are capable of, and what happens when the room decides before the evidence is in. The thing I keep returning to in this story is not the 4 seconds. 4 seconds is the headline, the thing that is easy to describe and easy to remember. What it points to is harder. It is this. The man in the gray shirt walked into a room that had already decided. He heard the laugh. He knew its direction. And he set his bag down anyway and introduced himself with a first name and asked if there was time to work. Not because he needed to prove anything to that room. He did not. He had nothing to prove to anyone in it. He set his bag down because the thing he had come for was not about him. He had come because a 15-year-old girl had a notebook she wasn't writing in, and a father who was carrying something he couldn't put down, and a mat in a gym on Avalon Boulevard where, on a Tuesday evening in November, the evidence was about to arrive. I don't know what it requires to walk into a room like that. To hear the laugh and keep walking. To set the bag down and ask about the open session. I would like to think I could do it. But I have been in rooms where the laugh was aimed at someone else, and I have not always done the thing that would have been right. And that is the more honest thing to say. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known reputation for extraordinary skill, deep humility, and the specific generosity of giving time to people who need to see something true. Drop a comment and tell me what landed for you. Not a summary. The specific moment, The one you're still thinking about. I read every one. If you know someone who has been in a room that decided before the evidence was in, a young person, or someone who isn't so young anymore, share this with them, not as a lesson, as company. Subscribe if these stories matter to you. There are more. See you in the next one.